Welcome to the Next Class 2.0 with host Rob Birdsell, Kent Hickey, and Erin Barisano. Join us as we discuss the latest trends and innovations shaping education.
Hello and welcome to the Next Class. I'm Rob Birdsell. Special day. I'm joined by both of my co-hosts, Kent Hickey and Erin Barisano. This should be a fun one. Kent, first start with you. How are you?
Doing fine here, Rob. Let me look outside to see how things look in the Seattle area. Oh, it's raining. So this is really surprising. It's a rainy day here, but I'm very, very happy because if you look over my shoulder, you'll see I just put up one of my favorite pictures. It's Brett Favre, and he's saying to me an autograph, "Kent, be the best." So it's coming from Brett Favre. Right. So anyway,
he's had a few controversies the past few years.
This was pre-controversy.
Okay. And Erin, you're coming to us from a new office.
I am. I'm at home today, and this is actually my husband's editing office. So, from sunny Southern California, let me look outside. Oh wait, it's 75 degrees and sunny. So what a surprise! Right?
Well, I think I can top both you guys. It's about 19 and sunny here with about a foot of snow on the ground.
Oh. Nice.
It is. No, it's great. We haven't had snow like this in Chicago in years. I didn't use my snowblower for 3 years, and so I just didn't tune it up this summer, and I am kicking myself. Like what? The first year I didn't tune up the snowblower, we get constant snow. Anyway, this is a little different format. Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us going here.
Great. Well, thanks, Rob. Good to be with you guys. And this is a little bit of a different format because I will be guiding the conversation and shooting questions at both you and Kent. Today's episode is based on your recent white paper that you co-authored. It's on the Catholic School Board, Sacred Work for an Apostolic Work. So I'd like to begin with, first of all, I love the title, and we'll get into a little bit about that kind of intentionality around some of the language. But your timing of this, you wrote this a few months ago, and it is, I would say in the world of Catholic education, very, very timely. What prompted you to write this now? What are some of the trends that you're seeing in Catholic school governance, kind of over the past 20 years and looking into the future?
Rob, you want to jump in, or do you want me to jump in here?
Well, I can give a brief introduction,
Sure.
And then you can go deeper. But Kent and I, through our work at ILE, along with you, have seen a big shift the past few years in the role boards are playing, and the relationship between the board and the president seems to, in many places, be a bit cantankerous, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And so that led us to think about this and to write the paper. But, to your second question, Erin, I remember when I was at Market High as a student, before Kent and I got there as teachers and administrators, and it was an early board. At Market High, they were beginning to turn to lay leaders to help them guide it. And so it's really been in the past 30 to 40 years that we've seen these boards come into existence. And with that, I'll turn it to Kent to dig deeper into sort of the origin of the paper and boards in general.
It has been over the last 30 or 40 years, and it's been a really good thing. It's been a really good thing to have boards, whether advisory boards or corporate boards or what have you. This has been really a positive thing. I think, build on what Rob said, if you remember, our first white paper was all about the spiritual CEO, right?
Right, yeah.
And I would say this is a continuation of that it's trying to just pull us back constantly to why we're doing what we're doing. And it's all about Jesus. It's all about our faith. And we need to look at everything that we do through that lens. And that includes the board and particularly the head of school relationship and how that works. It's in order for a school to be successful, that has to be a really, really good relationship. But as Rob alluded to, over that, I would say this actually predates the pandemic. I think the work of a president has become more and more difficult. I think the expectations are higher. It's kind of the Mary Poppins syndrome, practically perfect in every way. And so I think there's been some tensions around this. And I think one of the things that we're clear about in what we wrote, there's actually two papers I'd reference here going back and forth. One is the white paper, Erin, you referred to,
Right.
but also this protocol that
Mm-hmm.
Rich Barth, who's a wonderful, he was the Nativity Board chair in Seattle, he and I co-wrote. They kind of are tandem documents. But I think one of the things that we want to make sure that we were clear about is these are good people, all of them doing good
Yes.
work, the
Yes.
presidents, the boards,
Yes.
and what have you. But there's a real problem. And what can we do to address that?
So let's talk about that problem. Why is this source of friction? You stated, and I think very, very accurately, we're talking about good people here. Heads of schools, great people, dedicating their lives to leading Catholic education. Boards, our board members, really good people who are investing their time, their talent, their treasure into Catholic education. So why is there this source of friction?
That's what we hope to dig into today. But I think one of them, sometimes these board members treat the school as a business. They're talking about margin. It's an apostolic work. It's not a business. And I think that's very important for all board members to understand that it is the work of the church. And I think many of them come to this from a business lens. They serve on boards and they have a board themselves. And so that's their frame of reference, which makes sense. Like if you sit on two corporate boards and you have a board that you report to, you're going to treat this similarly.
Right, right.
Yeah, the Catholic School Board is not experienced very differently from what Rob just described. It's really not a Catholic school board. So, for example, Catholic school boards, they don't make decisions, they discern. And discern is grounded in spirituality. So, one of the major issues is, how often are our boards really immersed in prayer, in contemplation, in doing things together.
Mhm.
But I'd say here's what this would be a little more specific about where I think that the issue is. I think sometimes it may be the governance structure is off, but that's usually not it. There's no perfect governance structure. No one's ever found it, and no one ever will. But it's really generally not that. I also, as we already alluded to, there probably are some bad actors. Yeah, actually, I think there are some bad actors.
Uh-huh.
But those are few and far between. I really think the crux of it is that there are not protocols set up that require ongoing communication between the president and the board. And so if the president kind of decides to go off on his own or her own a little bit, or the board does the same, there's not really a mechanism in place that requires the kind of dialogue that really has to happen. And so I think that what we really should be looking at is, and again, I wouldn't call it contract language, although it could be. I would
Mhm.
call it more like protocols that establish communication processes that people can rely upon when things get tense. When things aren't tense, when everyone's getting along, yeah, there's no need for rules because
Sure,
everyone's getting
sure,
along. But that's
right.
not what rules are for.
Yeah.
And so rules are generally designed for when there's ongoing tension or potential conflict. So I would say what we really need to look at, final comment I'll make is what contract language does exist does not take the role of the president, is not helpful to the role of the president in a lot of ways. That it's very one-sided for the board chair, for example,
Okay.
if there's a conflict. There's very little a president can do. And this is from
Got it.
reviewing countless contracts. So I think there has to be a more balanced relationship between the president and the board, particularly the board chair. It has to be written down in some kind of protocol, and the grounding of everything is communication, because that often is the source of the tension.
Great, and I think yeah, I mean you summed it up nicely, Kent, and I agree with you. I think it all comes down to communication. What are the rules that we set in place for when that tension starts? On an everyday basis, you don't need to refer to the rules, but when there is that source of friction that we're starting to identify, go back to those. So I love that. The title of this white paper, "Sacred Work for an Apostolic Work." I love that language. I think it's so beautiful, and I'm guessing very intentional. So can you just kind of share how you landed on that language, particularly that apostolic work? How is this school board work apostolic work?
Rob, don't you think when we came up, that title is hitting me now, we were channeling our inner Erin Barisano. I think that's where does it come from? I have a feeling it's from Erin Barisano. Through these conversations,
It may have been.
it's always looking at it through that lens. But go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry, I jumped in. That's what struck me there. So.
Well, actually, one of the things I remember when we're coming up with the title was an example you used, Kent, of how and where to start board meetings. And your idea was start in the chapel, and not for a quick 3-minute cursory prayer, but for actually 30 minutes of contemplation. It could be a lectio, it could be a guided meditation, but actual intentional prayer. That really framed the title for me with that example and that concrete image that you used at Seattle Prep.
Well, I would say that's not my idea. That's our idea, our focal point of what we're trying to do at Eiley. So this is just on ongoing discussions. But I'd say every school I've been at, there's been I will say that I something that I really insisted upon, and usually was working with a board chair that also wanted it, for that reason too. But I'd say, Rob, not only starting in the chapel, although it's essential that meetings start in the chapel, or it can't be this perfunctory 2-minute prayer, but also I'd say ending, how it ends. There was a wonderful PACE person for the old Oregon province, the Jesuit Oregon province, provincial assistant for secondary ed, Cindy Rayapel, who was a great principal at Gonzaga Prep in Spokane as well. But anyway, what I remember when we would have these meetings is we would always end our meetings together. This would be the 5 or 6 schools in the province at the time. We would go around the room, and Cindy would ask the question, where in our time together did you sense consolation? And where in our time together did you sense desolation? So I'd say it's the beginning and the end that frames it, so that during it, there is this spirit, and that's where discernment comes alive and
Sure.
such. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying that I think that this title comes from the fact that it really helps board members to understand, to go to what Rob already pointed out. You're not on Boeing's board,
Yeah.
and you're not on the local private school board either. This is an apostolic work of the church. You're caring for something that God has given to us, a school and the children. And so that's a very different way to proceed as a board than other boards.
And
We're
why?
going to let's take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors.
The next class, 2.0, is proudly sponsored by Catholic Education Services and Eiley, 2 organizations committed to supporting Catholic schools and their leaders. Catholic Education Services, formerly Catholic Virtual, partners with Catholic schools to deliver online education services, including expanding course offerings, filling teacher openings, and creating alternative learning options. Learn more at catholiceducationservices.com. Eiley, the Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship in Education, offers Catholic school leaders a unique professional community for spiritual formation, leadership development, and renewal. Discover more at eileyconnect.org. That's ILEECONNECT.org. Together, we're helping Catholic schools thrive today and lead with vision for tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. So Kent, before the break, you were talking about the way you start the meeting and also the way you end the meeting, and I think that's beautiful. Why do you think this is so challenging, though, for boards to embrace those? These are beautiful spiritual practices that you're describing. Why is it challenging?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's challenging once it gets going.
Okay.
Like once it gets going, then and at the schools I was at, again, we'd also do retreats. We tried to do overnight retreats,
Uh-huh.
and such if we could, and just do, and it was truly retreat, not like a workshop and this kind of thing. Once it gets going, then board members are like, oh, that's like my favorite board to work on, because they're digging deep into their own spirituality and such. I think the problem is just getting it off the ground,
Okay.
because people come in with certain expectations, because as Rob's already pointed out, they've already done other board work, right? And none of this stuff happens. So all of a sudden when they come in, it's when you're trying to turn the ship that it happens. So this is I was not there at the time this happened, but just a quick little story. There was someone who, for a particular school's board, they were trying to make this turnaround, and they were talking about very, mission related things, right? It was all
Mhm.
about spirituality. And one board member turns to another board member loud enough to make sure that everyone heard, and said, when are we going to get done with this mission stuff? But it wasn't stuff that he said. When are we going to get done with this mission stuff and get into the real business?
Right.
Well,
Okay.
that is the real business.
Sure.
So I think once it gets going, it's
Okay.
easy to keep going, because that's what people want.
Yeah, and what you're describing is changing culture, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly, and establishing culture. One of the things that, again, the language that you chose in this white paper in particular, very, very intentional. Tell me a little bit more about, you mentioned the head of school is the director of the work. I want to dig into that a little bit, because
Yeah.
again, we don't see this often when we're talking about school governance, but it's very, very beautiful language.
So I actually, in my last couple of years at Seattle Prep, I started putting that under my name. So it'd be president
Mm,
slash director of the work. And the reason why was, while I was hired by the board, it was a corporate board, to be the
okay.
president, I was missioned by the provincial to be the director of the work. And
Okay.
and it goes back to apostolic work. The work is an apostolic work, part of the church. The director of the work, and it goes back probably more to when there were mostly religious leaders, clergy or what have you,
Uh-huh.
who were doing it, because it fits more within that. But I would say the most important of those two titles is the director of the work, because first and foremost, what the head of school does is the one who safeguards and animates mission. That's
Yeah.
number one. And every evaluation should start and end with that. So if a person is doing presidential duties that are, let's say, confined to fundraising, finance, facilities, those types
Hmm.
of things,
Right.
wow, what a really good manager. Is that a Catholic school leader? Not in and of itself, not at all. The director of the work is the one who's looking at the mission and trying to make sure that all decisions flow in and through that, animating the work. So my suggestion would be, and that's what we had in that white paper you referred to, is kind of look at that you're the director of the work.
Yeah.
But you also get a lot of people looking at you like, kind of, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, where does that come from? Well, without knowing the context, it doesn't make any
Right.
sense.
Right. But then that forces the conversation,
Yes.
and then to go deeper. So again, I think very intentional, very, very strategic language there. Let's talk a little bit about culture. You talked about kind of shifting culture, establishing culture. You have a reference in here of David Brooks, is called thick institutions, those with rich, meaningful internal cultures steeped in faith rather than the thin procedural ones. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about that thick versus that thin culture of an effective Catholic school board.
Yeah, when Brooks talks about thick institutions, he's really pointing to places where culture is carried more by story than by rules. And in a thick culture, people don't need everything spelled out because they already understand the story of the place, where it came from, what it's trying to do, who it's trying to form. That shared narrative becomes a lens through which decisions get made. When a culture is thin, on the other hand, you end up compensating with procedures and policies. But when it's thick, people act in habit and conviction because they know the story they're participating in. And that's especially true in Catholic education, where identity and mission are sustained less by structure and more by narratives that get repeated over time.
So that's kind of the enculturation through narrative, which is it's
Right.
kind of like a Joseph Campbell thing, right? Where it's like the mythology is what grounds the institution, right, in some way. And so there's a mythology to our schools. I think David Brooks really does capture this. We do use him a lot, particularly the eulogy lives versus resume lives,
Right.
which is
Right.
so central to Eiley in our seminars. Um, but a thick culture would be what you already alluded to, Erin. Let's compare it to what would be a thin board culture.
Hmm.
Here's the agenda. We're going through committee reports. Um, we prayed because remember we said the glory be, and so we checked. So we're done. Done with that. We move on. And so a thick culture is one that is so immersed in its mission and its charism that things flow from that very, very clearly. There's a depth to it. There's time associated with it. Here's an example of a thick culture. Uh, and thick culture has to be demonstrated through actual protocols and practice. Like
Okay.
it's not just this
Yeah.
ethereal kind of thing out there. Here's a great one. This is something that I countered last week when I was talking to someone. I don't think that any board should ever pass any motion that was introduced at that board meeting.
Mhm.
People are having a discussion, and it's a good discussion, and then someone says, "Well, how about this?" Okay. Well, if it's new, if it's brand new, then it might be a great idea. And waiting a little while will help confirm that. Waiting a little while will also maybe reveal it wasn't so great an idea. People get caught up in the moment. Boards get caught up in the moment. And all
Sure.
of a sudden they're making decisions as opposed to discerning. So the classic piece for a thick culture for a board is, are you a discerning board? And I think, I remember some Jesuits arguing over this once. St. Ignatius doesn't really, for example, talk that much about communal discernment, if at all. But you know who does is St. Benedict. If you look at the rule of Benedict, there's all these protocols in place that ensure that the community is a thick culture because of the level of discernment and discussion that happens as things go along.
That's great. I'm glad that you brought in that just kind of explanation for maybe those who are listening that haven't experienced a board that is a discerning board, but really that decision making board. And I do think that that's what we see a lot of. I think that in my experience, the board is decision making board, and that means we make decisions
Mhm.
as they're presented to us
Yes.
instead of that really discerning posture. So that's a great explanation. Thank you. And this idea then, I think everything that you described, starting with this the recognizing that it's apostolic work, taking the time to establish the culture, this discerning stance, and all of that together then leads to what you identify as the countercultural Catholic school board. Tell me a little bit about that, in your experience.
Oh, well, things that we've already alluded to is that it runs against the culture because of its grounding in prayer and contemplation, its grounding in discernment. Um, uh, to me, the image that I have of the counterculture is out of the immediacy of the moment and thinking more long term and visionary. Um, you know this, both of you, but I'll share it because some of our people don't know this. But you know that what happened 1,000 years ago, it was at a construction site 1,000 years ago, and there was a visitor there
Mhm.
and asked one of the workers at this
Right?
construction site, "What are you doing? You've heard this,
Yeah,
right?" Like,
yeah, the
so, and the work
bricklayers.
and
Yeah.
and the worker says, "I'm cutting stones because we're going to fit
Hmm.
them together." And then he goes to the second worker and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I have to really smooth out the tops because we're going to be putting these stones one on top of the other." And then he goes to the third worker and says, "Well, what is it that you're doing?" And this worker says, "Well, I'm building a cathedral." You've got to have both. Like, if you just
Yes.
have the vision for the cathedral and you don't know how to cut the stones and put them together, if
Yes.
your finances aren't right, if all the you got to have that, stuff. But if your eyes are not on the vision on the horizon, okay, then it doesn't really matter.
Right.
You might as well just go and build a cafe. That's fine. You know what I mean? Cafes are nice, what have you. So I think that's the distinction, in this really thick culture,
Uh-huh.
is it's the kingdom of God that's being built here.
Yeah, and that's exactly where the countercultural piece really shows up for me. Because when a board truly understands itself as participating in an apostolic work, it can't operate only out of immediacy or personal interest. It has to hold that long horizon Kent's talking about. And that's hard because it runs against almost every instinct in contemporary governance. We're conditioned to ask, what do we need right now? What's the pressure point? Who's unhappy in this moment? But discernment asks a different question. What is God asking of this work over time? That's why composition of the board matters so much, not because parents don't care, they care deeply, but because proximity can make it very difficult to step back and see beyond the immediate needs of one family or one cohort of students. And if the board can't lift its gaze, then the vision starts to collapse into management. So a countercultural Catholic school board is one that's willing to resist that pressure to prioritize prayer, formation, and mission clarity, even when that feels inefficient or unpopular. It's choosing to build the cathedral, not just manage the construction site. And that choice shapes everything from how decisions are made to who is invited into leadership in the first place.
That was maybe a little bit of a controversial part of our white paper, but and it'd be hard to do, but it's the right thing to do. And if
Uh-huh.
nothing else, though, you should at least limit it. You should limit to people that
Sure.
are serving in particular leadership capacities within the school itself, or something like that.
Yeah.
And a parent, let's say the
Yeah.
parent association, what have you. But any board that is primarily parent is always going to have problems, because there'll be a number of parents that won't be able to see long-term vision. They're into the immediacy of their child's. I'm talking about high schools here, but what's going to
Yeah.
happen the next, 4 years or so. And when you're looking at things like, helping a school right now, they're doing a principal search,
Uh-huh.
and and it has to be, if you should have parent input on that. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but it shouldn't be driven by that, because otherwise you have parents that are going in and saying they're going to look at their particular interests and saying, my son is the top ukulele player in the country, and I noticed that we're not devoting enough resources to ukuleles, or whatever it might be,
Right.
right? And so it's real. I think we have to be much more intentional about how many parents we have on. And I'm with
Yeah.
Rob. I think the best thing to do is say none. They can serve on committees. That's awesome. That's your bench
Yeah.
for the board.
Yeah. And yes, and I think again, it's just a very human response, right? To if we're a parent, we want to see things
Yes.
while our kids can experience them and enjoy
Yes.
them, and that's within the next couple of years. So
Right.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love one of the things that we didn't get into, but I encourage our viewers to go back and read this. But you have a list of best practices for Catholic school boards, and number 20, it's 20 practices. Number 20 says the board chair and the director of the work should go out for a beverage once a month.
Beers with Birdsell.
Uh-huh. And what comes from that? Why is that so valuable?
Yeah, that one always catches people's attention when they read it because it sounds almost too simple.
Mm.
But the point isn't the beverage, it's the relationship. If the board, chair, and the director of the work only ever interact in formal meetings, then everything
Of
becomes
course, yeah.
transactional and positional. That regular, informal time creates space for trust, for shared reflection, and honestly, for the kinds of conversations that don't fit
Yeah.
neatly on an agenda. You start talking about how people are doing, what's weighing on the mission, where there might be tensions before they harden into problems. And it reinforces that this is not just a governance structure, it's a shared apostolic responsibility. When you sit together regularly, outside of crisis or decision making moments, you're reminded that you're collaborators, not adversaries. Over time, that rhythm shapes the culture at the top. It models communion, it models listening.
One of our spiritual mentors for both Rob and myself is Father Frank Matchka, a wonderful Jesuit at Marquette
Mhm.
High for a number of years, and passed away a couple years ago. But he wrote a wonderful essay called "Catholic Schools Are All About Tables," and he went through the various ways. But there is something to be around a table, breaking bread or what have you. And when that stops happening, that's a huge problem. Erin, just somewhat related to that, because we have those 20 in the white paper,
Right.
and then the protocol. I encourage people to look at that too, and if anyone wants to discuss it further, to reach out for one of us, because actually, since it's been published, I've been working with a couple of schools on this now. Best time to look at the stuff is when there is not tension, right? And
Yes.
so what you see in the protocols, again, it's not contract language per se, but when I was looking through it again, what I was struck by was we shouldn't just simply assume that those kind of conversations that Rob just described happen. And we
Right.
have to kind of build them into the protocols, okay?
Mhm.
So I just want to mention a couple things real briefly that are in there. It's too much to go over in any detail, but for example, the evaluation process is all over the board, literally, at schools throughout the country. And they should be more clear. Strong fences make good neighbors kind of deal. All right.
Yeah.
And so what one of the issues is when people don't do evaluations or such. And by the way, every evaluation should also include anonymous survey results from direct reports to the president. It's really
Mm.
important for the board to hear that. And it's really important for them to be anonymous. And there should be a complaint procedure if one of the reports has a complaint against the president. But you know what? That can't be anonymous, because the other thing that needs to happen is there has to be real dialogue and disclosure.
Sure.
Conversation
Sure.
between people. In some circumstances that can't happen, but in most of them. But I guess what I'm saying is that we should try to build in ongoing communication and a process that leads to ever more and more and deeper sharing, because then things have a tendency to not get out of hand. And I'll mention one final thing, because this may be the favorite part that I have of the protocol. Is our suggestion is that either the president or the board chair at any time can say, I'd like to meet with you with a facilitator present, not a mediator, anything like that,
Okay.
but a person that both agree to, so not on the board, probably not associated with the school, or retired, whatever it might be. And the whole point to the meeting is not to problem solve anything. The whole point to the meeting would be, I need to let you know what I'm feeling right now, or I need to let you know where I'm struggling, and
Mhm.
I need to hear your perspective. And it's important to have a third person there, because that person can then kind of share back, here's what I'm hearing and such. So again, I think when relationships are good, that just happens naturally. You're just having those kind of conversations where there's candor and such. But particularly when it moves toward tension, it really has to be an avenue that people are allowed to explore. So again, that's in these protocols we wrote. I think that'd be an important one to put into some kind of agreement.
Great. Well, thank you. And yes, I think that as we start experiencing different governance models, and not only at the high school level, we're seeing lots of governing boards emerging at the elementary level as networks are created and things like that. In my own diocese, we're going through that right now. This white paper and the protocol, very, very, very helpful for all of those good people who want to support this great mission of Catholic education. Any closing thoughts before we finish up here?
Yeah, I guess just to build on all of this, I'd say the common thread is that governance has to be relational before it can be effective. Structures matter, protocols matter, but they only work if there's real trust and care underneath them. In particular, boards have to recognize the human reality of leadership. Presidents and heads of schools carry a tremendous amount, and they need a place where they can be honest, where they're supported, and where they're not expected to have it all figured out all the time. If that care isn't there, everything else starts to fray. And I think we see new governance models emerging, whether at the high school level, elementary networks, or diocesan structures. The opportunity is to get this right from the beginning, to build boards that are mission-centered, discerning, and genuinely supportive of the people entrusted with their leadership.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think a number one job for the board is to care for the president, because the president can't be going to the staff and saying, "I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. I just know things are really bad."
Yeah.
That kind of. So
Right,
when
right.
you have those moments when you're down, and you're going to have those moments when you're down because you're human, whatever. I think to be able to have those kind of discussions, I think is really important. And the other, somewhat related to this, as Rob mentioned, And what you mentioned, Erin, about what's happened in your diocese and the movement that you've made there in terms of this structure, which I think what you've done is really a national model. I think more and more, and I'm working with a diocese right now in the Midwest on this very thing. So it's going to be a Catholic high school and 3 Catholic grade schools,
Okay.
and they're going to have a president. Okay, this is really, I think, what should be happening at particularly mid-level cities around the country. Those 4 schools don't have the resources or the need to have a president principal model, right? But what they do need is to have a president for all of them, and then have principals that are really focused on what's happening inside. But when I was working with this diocese, immediately the people that are working on this, and great people, but all the talk was the president stuff, fundraising, finance, whatever. Had to come back and say, it's the spiritual CEO. It's not something, the number one job of the president is always to be the spiritual CEO, and that cannot be abdicated. So, and it's the best part of the job.
And it is the best part of the job. I agree.
Yeah, and I think that's why that language matters so much. Spiritual CEO isn't just a clever phrase. It names what the work actually is at its core. If the president loses that orientation, or if the board allows that role to be reduced to management, then something essential has been lost. And when it's done well, it really is the best part of the job. It's a place where leadership, prayer, discernment, and care for people all come together. That's what gives the role meaning beyond metrics or outcomes. I think boards that understand this are much more likely to support their presidents in the right way, not just by measuring performance, but by accompanying them spiritually and humanly. And when that relationship is healthy, it sets a tone of trust and gratitude that carries through the whole institution.
I just want to add that too, like, for the most part, now not always, for the most part, I loved, 24 years I was head of school. I love the boards I worked with. Some of them are still really became friends over time, and such as care. So even though we've been focusing on and there has been more conflict, I mean, there's no doubt about it. But also, let's look at the relationships are so good, and I'm so appreciative of them. And I want to mention one final thing from my end anyway, who I'm appreciated for, is we lost an excellent president of schools, Father Greg Goethals. And I just want to mention that he was long time, right? And you both know Greg. I love Greg, and I loved his humor. We used to sit in the back of room during meetings and kind of not pay attention together. So maybe we weren't good for each other in some ways, but I love Greg Goethals. And if there's someone that to me represents the spiritual CEO, it's that man. And he was at Loyola for a number of years. So God bless our friend, who I am certain is having a lot of fun in heaven right now. So
I am certain, yes. Well, thank you, Kent. Thank you, Rob, for sharing your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge. I do think that this is going to be the wave of the future for Catholic schools. These kind of new governance models, and then continuing to build on existing governance models with these boards. And for our listeners, if you haven't had a chance to read this or to look over those protocols, I think we're going to put those in the show notes. So please take a moment to look at that. This has been fun. So thanks for allowing me to guide this conversation and to dig a little bit deeper into this work.
You're awesome, Erin. Thank you very much.
To all our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope that you subscribe to the next class. If you enjoyed this, please like it, share it with your family, and until the next time, see you at the next class.
Thank you for tuning in.